reunions that occur after more than half a century. No one returned, only letters, diaries, and messages.
Bây giờ nhận được cái lá thư này về mà bố, mẹ cũng không còn, mà bác cũng không còn nữa, mà chỉ còn hai chị em.
Tôi khóc. Khóc như bây giờ. Tôi thương quá. Được nhận cái hồ sơ này, coi như báo tử lần thứ hai.
These documents serve as evidence of individuals who lived, fought, and sacrificed for their nation. They have been meticulously preserved by dedicated individuals across the ocean.
We've taken on this as a mission, a humanitarian mission, because there's thousands of letters, there's hundreds of diaries.
This isn't just about preserving information about a past war like historical lessons. It's about creating chances for fallen soldiers to return to their families. The people at the Vietnam Center and Sam Johnson archives have worked tirelessly for decades to kindle such hopes.
Considered as one of the largest collections of documentary record of the war in Vietnam, the Vietnam Center and Sam Johnson Vietnam Archive at the Texas Tech University has been able to turn a lot of diaries, letters, war artifacts of fallen Vietnamese soldiers to their families, many of whom have been waiting for more than 50 years to learn more about what happened to their loved ones. Among millions of pages of materials and tens of thousands of photographs, slides, maps, audio, moving images, and books are the invaluable information shedding more light on the lesser-known parts of the war that we still have to learn today. And we are lucky enough to welcome on our Talk Vietnam two key people who have been instrumental in that effort to learn more about this special center. Please welcome Dr. Steve Maxner, Director of a Vietnam Center and Archive, and History Professor Ron Milam, Executive Director of the Institute for Peace and Conflict at Texas Tech University. Thank you so much, both of you, on Talk Vietnam.
Thank you very much for having us.
Nice to be here.
Yes, I know that this is the second time that you returned war legacy documents to Vietnamese families in Vietnam. So how do you feel about it?
We feel wonderful about it. It was quite remarkable last year when we did it for the first time. And we had a very large crowd, and we had, I think the emotions were most remarkable to me because it was the first time that we'd done anything like this. And then this year, it was even more special because the people were appreciating us for being here the second time.
How different was it the second time compared to the first time?
Well, the first event we hosted, it itself was very special in that it established an important partnership for us. And at Texas Tech, we've got these wonderful resources, as you said, a lot of archival documents and materials that we've been collecting since 1989, so 35 years now. And within that large set of documents, 30 million pages, are these incredible treasures that really they belong to the families, so the Vietnamese soldiers who served or the Vietnamese veterans who are still alive.
Why do you think they are personal treasures?
They're the documents that a soldier keeps of a record of their service, the diaries and journals where they keep notes about their experiences, and they're unique documents in that they're telling that one soldier's story, and I think they're made all the more special and really a treasure for the families, especially the fallen soldiers, because that's the last thing that they have from that soldier. And many families have been waiting, as you said, for 50 years. Yeah. And I come back to the experience we had with Dr. Trom. And when Fred Whitehurst came to Texas Tech in 2005 and presented her diaries to us as a donation, an archival donation, with the promise that we would help them find the family, which we, of course, successfully did in October. The family came to Texas Tech. And what really, I think what impacted us the most with that visit was Mother Trom, Duan Ngoc Trom, who recently passed. She held those diaries to her chest and expressed that she was holding the soul of her dead daughter, and just how important and powerful those diaries were for her as they talked about her daughter's experiences during the war.
Right.
And so, to me, that makes it a family treasure, right? It's not something that it's ephemeral or anything like that. This is something that's important, that's lasting, that's going to be a part of that family's heritage now. And I think there's so many more families in Vietnam that feel that way about the letters and the diaries and journals that we're now returning.
The idea of establishing a center to archive documents related to the United States in the war in Vietnam originated in 1989 when a group of American veterans gathered at Texas Tech University to share their experiences from the war. One of the veterans, Dr. James Regner, who is also a historian, had long noticed the lack of information and understanding among students regarding this historical period. They quickly decided to establish an archive center with the mission of collecting and preserving materials and artifacts related to the war in Vietnam. In August 2007, the Vietnam Center and Sam Johnson Archives, or VNCA, became the first American organization to sign an exchange agreement with the State Records and Archives Department of Vietnam. To date, the center has amassed over 30 million pages of documents related to the war in Vietnam and the country's history. These include more than 2.7 million pages of documents from Vietnamese People's Army units that were seized after battles, a collection of materials such as reports, personal papers, and photographs donated voluntarily by individuals and organizations in the U.S., tens of thousands of artifacts recovered from the battlefield, and 1,300 interviews with American veterans. VNCA has become the largest and most comprehensive archive dedicated to the war in Vietnam. It also supports and encourages research and educational activities to help future generations better understand the war that took place more than half a century ago.
Why do you think there is a need to study more about the war in Vietnam?
I'll let you take this one. As a resident
Both of
Vietnam
you are
War-
historians.
Yeah,
so-
true.
Well,
true.
Yeah.
I'll let him start.
I
and then
have
I'll
the
finish.
great privilege and honor, I guess, to teach the Vietnam War at Texas Tech University, and I've been doing that for 20 years now. And it's still the most popular history course that we teach, even more popular than World War II, more popular than the Civil War. And I keep asking myself, why do the students still keep coming? And I don't have any better answer. I asked one time, they say because the Vietnam War for Americans was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Now, what a terrible way to think of a war, but that's kind of how Hollywood approached that war in the 1970s and the 1980s and every decade after that. But the Vietnam War was a moment in American history where it changed everything about the way we think about our government, the way that we think about the world, the way we react to just individual lives and to each other. It tore us apart. And then to think about what we did to this country in the process of doing that. So it's so important because every war that we have had since then has been sort of the platform for understanding the current wars is Vietnam. I think that's very important.
Well, I completely agree with Dr. Ron Milam. I think that, the Vietnam War, there's just so many facets, controversies, and so many things that we still need. Maybe not lessons learned, but lessons to be remembered. The mistakes that were made, and the things that we could have done differently, the things we should have done differently, especially the United States as a nation. There were a lot of decisions that were made at the time, and within historical context, they made sense. But in retrospect, in hindsight, incredible errors in judgment.
Is there any gap in terms of understanding about the war after nearly half a century?
The materials that we have, the documents and materials that are donated to us, are important for telling the American side of the war. But what we're uncovering now with collections like the Captured Document Exploitation Center collection, CDEC collection, an incredible treasure of documents and history that has really not been used very much. It tells the story, again, of the North Vietnamese, the National Liberation Front soldiers, and of course, in a lot of the politics and policies of the government of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam at that time. And it's material that has been inaccessible because the way that, again, a military history collection or military intelligence collection that was gathered during the war, documents captured in the field, and then put on microfilm during the war, but using military intelligence terms as code words to try to, basically is what we call basically metadata, right, in today's parlance. But this information that was tagged on the film for each one of those documents made sense for military intelligence officials, but not for historians and scholars. That, and it's a microfilm collection that you can't search using microfilm readers. It's 952 reels of microfilm, 2.7 million pages, 265,000 documents. It's an unwieldy collection to try to manage just by reading on a reel. And so we digitized it, put it online, and we're adding additional data to that collection and adding metadata tags and things like that to make it more user-friendly for modern research. But a lot of those documents can retell the history and completely change the history of what we understand about the war. And how each side conducted the war, but also of incredible importance, the human side of the war, the human experience of war, the stories that soldiers were writing in those journals and in their letters. And it's a history that hasn't been told yet, but those documents will hopefully help reveal an incredible amount as a result.
There are tens of millions of pages of documents and a massive collection of artifacts, many of which have been contributed by individuals and organizations connected to the U.S. involvement in the war in Vietnam. The management and categorization of these materials at the VNCA are carried out meticulously and systematically.
We'll usually get about anywhere from 1 to 10 donations a week. Our job is to take it out of the acidic box and put it into an acid-free box to help preserve the paper. Letters, contact with a family, research on the person, photographs, and copy of their citation, things like that. So we won't inventory every box or every item in there, get them organized and do the more in-depth description and folder labeling and all that kind of stuff. The student is in the process, she's labeling all the folders and then putting them in an order so that they can be used. This collection here that you see that's being processed is some of the official paperwork of the 3-5 Cavalry. And so it's got their operation reports, lessons learned, which is description of the battle or an operation after they're finished with it or what was going on. If you have something that is like 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 boxes, it'll take a year to process.
Whether it's a single artifact or thousands arriving at once, everything is handled with the utmost respect at the center. Since its inception, the center has dedicated a significant manpower to digitizing the documents and providing access to those with demand. To date, this archive has provided invaluable information to researchers and has supported efforts to locate missing in action American soldiers and Vietnamese soldiers from the war.
Because there's still missing gap in understanding.
Yes.
So the existence of such archive is so important and vital. So can you tell us, how did you get the documents for the archive? And how did you categorize them?
Well, the initial documents are donated, and so a lot of, again, veterans who give us materials and documents like that, the CDIC collection, that we actually purchased from our national archives. Because again, it was, so during the war, as the documents were captured, they were sent to then Saigon, and they were processed and added to that microfilm. And then when the United States left Vietnam in 1973, they packed up that microfilm and sent it back to the U.S., and eventually it made its way to the National Archives and Records Administration in College Park, Maryland. And that's where all the military history records from the American side of the war, that's where they're stored. Well, they basically, those microfilm reels just sat there, and eventually the National Archives advertised that it was available. If people wanted to purchase a copy, you could purchase it. So we did. Okay. We immediately knew that this is just going to be an incredible potential treasure trove of documents and information. And once we purchased it, then it was a question of how are we going to make this usable. And that's when the digital and electronic and transfer challenges came in. Because how do you take that much material on film and put it online and make it accessible and usable? And so we worked with a number of individuals, and we hired, basically we did a proof of concept at Texas Tech using computer science students who helped us with some software. We approached another company to help us develop the full software package that we needed, and we were able to convert the entire film set and add it very quickly into our virtual archive.
Right. Why do you want to digitize all of the documents and then make them online for people to access?
So if you've ever been to Lubbock, Texas, in the United States, you will know that it's a very remote place. And so before our virtual archive, we had maybe 50 researchers who might come and visit us every year to conduct research on site. But once the technology became available in 2000, 2001, we realized that these collections would be much more widely used if we started digitizing and making them available. And so at that point, a lot of archives were refusing to do that. In 2001, 2002, maybe to 2005 or 6, archives were pushing back against it. They was like, don't digitize, don't digitize. We were like, no, we are digitizing. We're going to do everything we can online. And so the primary mission there was access. We knew that based on our meetings with veterans, our discussions with scholars, that there was an incredible interest out there.
Why do you have such an open approach to the artifacts and documents and materials?
I think it's a reflection of our personal philosophies, but also, again, an extension of Jim's philosophy of basically trying to be as inclusive as possible. And that means not just including as many voices in the archive, but also sharing those voices with the rest of the world.
In June 2023, for the first time, 30 photos of handwritten letters and 5 diaries were returned to the families of Vietnamese martyrs. In June 2024, another 12 families of wounded soldiers and martyrs received 35 photos of diaries and 7 wartime letters. After 2 years, nearly 100 letters, diaries, and battlefield records have been returned to martyrs' relatives. No one could have imagined that these precious relics of martyrs and veterans were being preserved on the other side of the world. Everyone was overwhelmed with emotion to see a part of their loved ones returning, even though it had been decades since they fell. To achieve this outcome, the Vietnam Center and Sam Johnson Vietnam Archive in the United States reviewed and processed millions of pages of documents, magnified from microfilms taken by American soldiers. These documents contain various pieces of information, such as names, hometowns, mailing addresses, places where letters were written, unit codes, and the working units of the writers. Overcoming significant language barriers, many of these documents were blurred or even missing text, making the compilation and completion of a dossier a time-consuming and resource-intensive task. After many years, the first dossiers were finally completed. The center proactively contacted the Vietnam Soldiers' Heart Initiative at the beginning of 2023 to provide clues, widely publish information, and cooperate in identifying the families of the martyrs documented in these dossiers. The family of martyr Nguyen Mang Bai was among the first to receive a relic.
Còn Nghĩa có hay nhắc đến anh không? Còn Chính chắc chả biết bố Chính là ai nhỉ? Liệu mai anh về, Chính có nhận anh là bố không?
Con vẫn nhận được ra chứ. Chị cũng xúc động và nhận tràn nước mắt thôi chứ không nói được lên không gì chứ.
Bây giờ nhận được cái lá thư này về mà bố mẹ cũng không còn, mà bác cũng không còn nữa, mà chỉ còn 2 chị em.
Tôi đã đọc được một đoạn và tôi nhận ngay ra chữ đó là chữ của anh tôi. Cho đến bây giờ thì phải nói rằng là đó là kỳ vật duy nhất còn lại của liệt sĩ Nguyễn Mộng Bảy.
Although they are just photographs, for many martyr families, they are priceless relics. These are messages that many martyr families have waited a lifetime to see. This information also gives hope to many families in finding the graves of martyrs and bringing them back to their homeland.
Cái tài liệu 2 là xã Hoài Sơn, huyện Hoài Nhơn, tỉnh Bình Định, là cái sư đoàn kỵ binh bay 1 Mỹ nó nhảy dù xuống đấy, thì ghi lại cái quyển nhật ký của bác ấy, ghi là những ngày khói lửa. Chỉ mong làm sao xác định để đưa hài cốt về nghĩa trang liệt sĩ quê hương. Đấy là nguyện vọng tha thiết nhất của gia đình.
Thế là cũng là một cái tia hy vọng để tìm được mộ của bố với chị.
Xem những cái kỳ vật đó gửi về, cái hiện vật tuy là thiêu hủy nhưng mà từ khi thiêu hủy ấy, thì chụp lại tất cả những hiện vật, cho nên những cái đó là cái mà chúng tôi rất cảm kích.
What are some of the most memorable stories of artifacts returned that moved you?
I think probably the most emotional experience that we've had so far with the return ceremonies was the return of letters. Now the diaries, again, very impactful, very powerful and important. But last year we had a pair of sisters who attended that ceremony and received letters from their brother. And you know, again, they had no idea what his experiences were like. They had no documents from him, about him. And this was the first glimpse they were able to get into what his life was like. And again, these documents that, you know, if not for that military intelligence collection, CDEC, you know, they would never have something to hold and to remember him with. And so, they were incredibly emotional when they got the letters. They cried. It made a bunch of us kind of teary and cry because it's just, again, the impact that has. 50 years later, they still wonder, they still worry, they just want to understand. And those letters provided that for them. It's no substitute for his life. It's no substitute for his remains, because that's another major issue, of course, is they can't properly mourn him because they don't have the remains from you know, where he died. And so, and that's one of the things that we are also working on, because you know, what's really remarkable about CDEC is the military intelligence side of it can be a very informative side, and specifically the documents are all tied to a very specific location. And so letters and diaries that were captured, well, there's a grid, what we call a military grid reference, grid coordinates. And that location, more than likely, is going to be the site where those documents were taken from a soldier's body. And there was a policy to immediately bury the dead. And so more than likely, there's a grave site in that proximity. And so it's interesting because the documents, the diaries, letters, that's kind of the first step in what might be an important quest to get some of the remains returned to the families as well.
Năm 1968, tôi được vinh dự gia nhập ngũ. Trong lúc Tổ quốc đang sôi sục đánh giặc xâm lược, giải phóng dân tộc, tôi đã xác định nhiệm vụ của mình phải sẵn sàng đi chiến đấu để giải phóng cho quê hương đất nước.
These were the words written by martyr Hoàng Văn Hội, penned shortly before he sacrificed his life in Cambodia in 1971. These handwritten words lie in the CDEC archive for decades before being returned to his family in 2022.
Tôi khóc. Khóc bây giờ tôi thương quá. Thế thôi, được nhận cái hồ sơ này coi như báo tử lần thứ hai.
This is just one of the many pieces of information that engineer Lâm Hồng Tiên has extracted from the CDEC. Having lost family members in the war, Lâm Hồng Tiên has dedicated many years since 2013 to studying millions of pages of CDEC documents, painstakingly verifying information, and creating the website kivathkhangchien.com to share the documents that the Americans had seized from the bodies of Vietnamese soldiers.
Những cái tài liệu này của Mỹ thu giữ là nó theo thời gian và nó tương đối rời rạc. Thế nhưng mà khi mà mình bỏ thời gian ra mình xem và mình có kết nối kiểm tra và cùng với cả các cái thông tin khác của phía bên mình hoặc là giữa các cái tài liệu này với nhau, thì sẽ từ những cái mảnh ghép rời rạc này thì nó sẽ tạo nên được một cái tổng thể mà nó tương đối rõ về một cái hoàn cảnh hoặc về một con người hoặc là một cái tình huống hoặc là một cái đợt hoạt động nào của một đơn vị. Có người em trai liệt sĩ ở Ninh Bình khóc rất là nhiều khi mà nhìn thấy những cái dòng chữ của anh trai mình.
Nếu đang làm dở công tác mà không may tôi hy sinh, các đồng chí hãy báo cho gia đình tôi nhé. Bố tôi mất, mẹ tôi Đồng Thị Sắc, địa chỉ như trên, Xin vĩnh biệt. Chào đồng chí.
Another story involves a bloodstained letter from a martyr named Minh Tiến to a woman named Lưu Liên. Through both persistent searching and extraordinary luck, Lâm Hồng Tiên found this woman and was able to deliver the letter that Minh Tiến never had the chance to send.
Và 53 năm tôi mới nhìn thấy cái dòng chữ thân yêu thì tôi buồn rủn chân tay. Rồi tôi òa, tôi khóc. Và khi dở cái trang nhật ký nhòe do thấm máu thì tôi hiểu rằng là liệt sĩ cũng có thể bị bắn ở ngực nữa chứ.
Even though these are only photocopies of the documents, they allowed a form of the martyrs to return to their families after decades. Moreover, the records contain valuable information about the time and location where the documents were seized, which Lâm Hồng Tiên has used to aid in the search and recovery of thousands of soldiers' remains across southern Vietnam over the years.
You talked about Mr. Tiên, Mr. Lâm Hồng Tiên,
Yes.
and he has been able to analyze and disseminate information about those documents to return to families for the past 10 years.
Yes.
So what do you think about that kind of effort from the Vietnamese side?
It was just amazing how much he had accomplished and very impressive. He's not a historian by training, but boy, he's earned he's just about earned a master's degree, if not a PhD. The level of research that he's conducted, and I think it's from my perspective, it's wonderful he's doing it. There's other folks I think who are doing it as well, but it's exactly the kind of network that we really want to establish, and we hope to establish and expand and grow, because again, it's great. We're very honored and privileged to be a part of this project, but at the end of the day, this is Vietnam's project. This is a way for Vietnam to really better understand its own history and legacy. And again, the more students, the more independent researchers like Mr. Tien that we can get involved in this. We really want that. We share his commitment, his passion, his love for this project.
Right.
And I think that's something that we share with him and a number of other folks as well.
Maybe you are aware of the case of martyr Đặng Thành Tuấn. And thanks to Mr. Tien's effort,
that's right.
So Mr. Đặng Thành Tuấn got recognized.
Yes.
So what can you tell about that?
Well, it's kind of interesting because we came to that in a kind of an oblique way. So we didn't know Mr. Tien at that time, but of course his family brought that case to the U.S. Embassy, and specifically the Defense Attaché's office became involved in that. A good friend of ours who's no longer at the embassy, his name is Chuck Casey. He was a U.S. Marine Corps major at the time, and he was the Marine Attaché. And so he was kind of tasked with managing this question. And so the family had presented the documents that Mr. Tien had found, and basically the government, I think the government's perspective is we need to verify, we need to validate this. And so Chuck reached out to us, and we were able to immediately, because again, we have the CETA collection digitized, it's not long, it's where Mr. Tien found the documents. We were able to validate, to verify that the documents were authentic. We were able to provide additional information about the specifics, where the collection is located, where those documents were located on the microfilm, as well as the digital copies that we have. The fact, of course, that the National Archives, not just at Texas Tech, and also provided additional validating information about his unit, where his unit was serving, and a lot of other details and data that then, of course, helped to inform that. We provided a letter to Chuck Casey, and I think that was used as the validation that was necessary to, of course, transition his case. So he was, of course, I guess the title martyr was provided to him and his family.
In Hoài An District, Bình Định Province, one of the most intense battlefields in southern Vietnam, there was a soldier who contributed to the national liberation effort and never returned home. Despite more than half a century passing, the soldier has not been officially recognized as a martyr because there was no documentation to prove that he had sacrificed his life on the battlefield for the country.
Tôi đã nhìn thấy nhiều người lính trở về nhà, người thì về bằng xương bằng thịt, người thì qua tấm bằng tổ quốc ghi công. Riêng gia đình tôi, về anh Tuấn của chúng tôi, chưa thấy nguồn thông tin gì.
Có những thông tin cho rằng bác hai tôi đào ngũ, chiêu hồi, cho nên các đơn vị mới không lưu hồ sơ lại. Mỗi lần nghe những cái thông tin miệt thị như vậy, ba tôi vô cùng đau đớn.
The case of martyr Đặng Thanh Tuấn family is one of the countless stories of families with loved ones missing from the war. Their journey to find information, hoping for a reunion or at least to restore the name of their fallen family member, was futile for many years. Hope only emerged when they discovered information related to Đặng Thanh Tuấn in a list of martyrs who fell in Tây Ninh battle in 1967, shared by engineer Lâm Hồng Tiên.
Đây này, có một số 17 nè, sinh năm 41 đúng rồi đúng không? Ân Đức Hoài Ân. Đấy. Ân Đức Hoài Ân Bình Định này.
This information, extracted by Lâm Hồng Tiên from the SEDEC archive, was crucial. With this valuable data and the confirmation and detailed records provided by the VNCA to the family through the U.S. Embassy in Vietnam, in September 2022, Đặng Thanh Tuấn was officially recognized as a martyr and awarded the Certificate of National Recognition alongside 8 other martyrs.
So we can see that from this case, it proves that your approach of, making it accessible and open to people is really benefiting the people of both sides. So now, this is also a general question, but what needs to be done to make the documents alive?
We need more help. We need more people to be learning about how the best way is for us to access this information. And one of the ideas we have is, Vietnamese students. We're going to be visiting we've visited already USSH Hanoi, and we'll be down in Hue, and we'll be at the Fulbright University in Ho Chi Minh City, and USSH Ho Chi Minh City. And so from our perspective, the more people that we can have helping us with these projects.
One of the things that we immediately identified as a potential project, and again, it's not just for us, but more importantly, to have more Vietnamese involvement in this, is crowdsourcing. And again, the collection itself lends itself to that kind of an endeavor, because we've got a special database set up just for SEDEC, where people can go in, log in, and they can basically tag documents with specific keywords. They can add text, they can translate documents, they can transcribe documents and things like that. So there's an incredible amount of contributions, incredible number of contributions that individuals can make, or they can just tag documents modestly. Whatever they decide to do, it's fine with us. But the key is to have people look at a document online in our virtual archive, in specifically what we call our collaboration portal for SEDEC, so that we can collaborate with many more people. And we can get more people reviewing the documents and saying, well, this document has information about a unit roster, or this document is a diary, or this document contains letters. And so we can isolate and more specifically target those collections and those materials. And of course, then we can start parsing it out per mission, right? So unit rosters and things like that, incredibly important for the missing in action. The same thing with the diaries that have a very detailed location information. So we can use a 6-digit grid coordinate, as the military calls it, and get within 100 meters of where someone's body might be buried. Things like that. So the more eyes we have on documents, the more people we have going online and actually contributing to that mission, it's going to make it, of course, a more efficient project.
Both of you talked about the hope that students from both sides would get more involved in this project. And I think it's sort of like an example of the partnership, the collaboration between Vietnam and the U.S. So is there anything else or example you think of the partnership between Vietnam and the U.S. in healing the wounds?
I think the important thing to realize about what it is we're doing now is what started way back in the 1980s to get us to where we are. And that is that really it was Vietnam's efforts and willingness to help America find its missing that opened diplomatic relations, but took a long time, way too long. But by 1995, when we recognized the efforts of this country, that allowed us to then take off and do all the other wonderful things we've done since 1995. But I don't think very many people realize what a great thing that the country of Vietnam did in allowing America to come in and look for our missing. And hopefully now we can pay it back. Because really that's what we're talking about, is that, and the numbers of course are so high. And so our hope is that in Texas Tech University, we are very proud to be able to say that we really don't care what side you're on. We want to find, for humanitarian reasons, we want to find the missing on all three sides, in the sense that we have been successful in finding about 1,000 of our own, thanks to the help of Vietnam. And now we take it to the next step and do everything we can, from us as a university, but also us as a nation, to help find the missing that are the numbers being so high.
Steve Maxner has been with the VNCA since 2007, although his involvement began in 1999. As a former military service member, Steve pursued higher education after his discharge and earned a PhD in history from Texas Tech University. Under his leadership, the VNCA has worked closely with Vietnamese counterparts, successfully repatriating numerous artifacts and documents of Vietnamese martyrs to their families and assisting in the search and recovery of thousands of soldiers' remains. Ron Milam served in Vietnam as a military advisor. Like many American veterans, the war left a profound impact on his life. Currently, he is the executive director of the Institute for Peace and Conflict, or IPAC, at Texas Tech University. Ron is also a history professor with extensive research on the U.S. involvement in Vietnam and its effects on American veterans' lives. He has published 2 widely recognized books on the subject.
Steve, you've been spending all your time at the center. You were a student and now you're the director. Right. So what made you do that?
Well, you know, when I went to Texas Tech to earn my PhD, I knew I wanted to study military history. I knew I wanted to study the Vietnam War. I had no idea I would ever travel to Vietnam. And that opportunity came in 1998. And Dr. Reckner got some support from some of the veterans in the Lubbock community and some support from the university. And I came on the first study abroad from Texas Tech to Vietnam in the summer of '98. And immediately fell in love with the country. It was such an incredible, life-changing experience for me. And I knew right then I wanted to stay and do something, and as far as not just in academia, but very specifically regarding Vietnam. So when Jim started the Oral History Project in 1999, he hired me to start that project. Then I got promoted progressively up the chain until he became the executive director of a new project and handpicked me to be his successor for the directorship. And it's just been an incredible honor. You know, I've been, as Ron mentioned, I've traveled to Vietnam extensively. Have not picked up nearly as much of the language as I want, because it's always a very brief stint, a month, a couple of weeks, a month, and then go home and forget everything.
Do you still count how many times you?
Actually, I stopped after 20. I guesstimate. So now about 23, 24, okay. Something like that. But now I have an even deeper connection to this wonderful country because my wife is Vietnamese. And so,
oh, really?
Yes. And so she and I met at Texas Tech. She came to Texas Tech under the VIED program to earn a PhD in higher education.
Can you speak Vietnamese?
No, I can't. That's what I mean. And so she's from Hue.
Okay.
And I know that your listeners will know when I say Hue dialect is a challenge by itself.
Can you say something with Hue dialect?
I cannot. I'm so embarrassed. I am so embarrassed to say no. I cannot. Okay. And my wife and her kids, she has 2 children, they love to tease me because they will tell me how to say things in Vietnamese 3 or 4 different ways. Kind of get my head spinning. But anyway, but so yeah, I just, again, fell in love with Vietnam in 1998 and haven't looked back.
And Ron, you've brought students to Vietnam 16 times, right?
Well, I brought students, I think, with Steve 10 times. And then I was a Fulbright Scholar also down at the University of Social Science and Humanities in Ho Chi Minh City for 6 months. So that was a longer time. But the thing I think I'm most proud of right now is I've done the math, and I've spent more time in Vietnam since the war than I did during the war, and I was here a year. So my days of this is much more positive than what I did 50 years ago. But our study abroad program that Steve and I are involved in is life-changing. We've brought about 120 students here over the years, and it's a life-changing experience for those students. They many times we've actually had a couple of students who got their applications approved for law school while they were here, and because of the things they learned here, this is a kind of law they want to study. They want to study war crimes. They want to do the things that can really help, and they say it's because of the trip to Vietnam. And we pretty much can follow all those 120 students where they are right now, what they're doing. They've all had life-changing experiences because of this trip that we were able to take them on. And that just makes us feel so good.
Oh, thank you so much for taking your time and for sharing, you know, very informative information about the archive, about what you are doing, about the projects, and I wish you all the best for your future
thank you very
endeavors.
much. Same to
Thank you very much for having us.
Getting valuable pieces from the huge collection of war documents, what the Vietnam Center and Archive of Texas Tech has been striving to do is meaningful and touching to all of us. I hope after watching this program, you are motivated to join the center and their friends in bringing the sacred keepsakes to families. Thank you so much for joining us, and see you again next time.